morning. We are going to give an exposition of an important technique in the theory of finite groups. It is known as minimal counterexample technique. This is essentially a modern dressing of well-ordering principle. Okay, and it goes in the reverse direction of the standard induction principle. Okay, induction proof. Okay, and this apparently was very popularized by the stalwarts Fate and Thomson in their work on finite groups. I'm not an expert in that. I learned this when I was an MSc student and I forgot about it. It was lying dormant, and then suddenly I recall. So I worked out some of the details. I would like to share that technique with people. Okay, so let me start the thing. See, all of us know the so-called principle of induction for natural numbers and the well-ordering principle. They are equivalent statement. What does the principle of mathematical induction state? If A is a non-empty subset of natural numbers, okay, you don't have to say that. Suppose A is a subset of natural numbers, so that 1 belongs to A, and whenever a natural number n belongs to A, n plus 1 also belongs to A. Then you want to say A is all of n. Okay, and what does, so let me just quickly say that. Principle of induction, mathematical induction as is known as sometimes. A is a subset of n with property 1 belongs to A and 2 n belong to A, where of course n plus 1 belong to A. So when I say n belong to A, remember it's a subset of natural number, therefore n must be natural number. Then A is all of n. And what does the well ordering principle say? Notice that there is also a generalized principle of induction. Sometimes it's known as strong principle or principle of strong induction. That is, 1 belongs to n, and whenever 1, 2, 3 up to n belongs to A, then n plus 1 belongs to A. Okay, that's called strong principle sometimes, but I think it's a weak principle because the hypothesis is stronger, conclusion is the same. Anyway, well ordering principle says, suppose B is a non-empty subset of natural numbers, then there exists an L in B so that L is the least element of B, which is same as saying L is less than or equal to M for all M in B. It's well known that these two things are equivalent. So many of the induction proofs which you see in mathematics, in principle, we should be able to prove it using well ordering principle, and vice versa, right? Okay. Now, what does the minimal counterexample technique says is the following. Okay, let us just illustrate quickly with a well-known result. Okay, so instead of formulating a little too vaguely, let me see, prove that. Let us prove this theorem. Let n be a natural number, n is greater than 1. Then there exists a prime divisor such that p divides n. Okay, this is basic to the so-called arithmetic, fundamental theorem of arithmetic. Okay, proof. Okay, now this can be proved by what I call strong principle of induction, but let us prove it by what I call minimal counterexample technique. What does it mean? So let S be set of natural numbers n, so that of course n is greater than 1 and n has no prime divisors. Has no prime divisors. Okay, now what do you want to prove? Notice that if the theorem is true, then S must be empty, right? So we want to prove S is empty, right? Now we will use well ordering principle. Suppose Suppose S is not equal to empty, therefore by well ordering principle, there is an M in S where M is the least element. Oh, yes, by well ordering principle. Is that okay? Now, what are the possibilities for M? First possibility is M is a prime. If M is a prime, then M divides M, right? And therefore, M does not. That implies M is not in S. You understood that? So this M cannot be. Okay, then the other possibility is M is not a prime. What does it mean? Okay. Okay. M is equal to some A type B, where A and B are proper divisors. Okay. Now that means 1 less than A less than M, and similarly for B. Right. Now A is a natural number and it's less than M, therefore A is not an element of S. Right? But A is not an element of S. What does that mean? And A is already greater than 1 also, and A is not an element. And yes, therefore that means there exists a prime P, so that P divides A. But A divides M, therefore P divides M. Right? Therefore, here also we conclude M is not an element of S. Right? So what do you think I have proved? If any element M is in S, okay, it has to be either a prime, not a prime. If it's a prime, I get a contradiction, M is not an element of S. And if it's a composite, then again I get a contradiction that M is not in S. This is almost like your Cantor's proof of there exists no onto function from X to P of X kind of argument, or Russell's Barber paradox. Okay. Now this M is called the minimal counterexample. Okay. Since I want to keep the lecture short, okay, some of the ideas which I want to share, they are all in very much detail found in this in this article of mine. So please go through it, download and view it. Okay. Just as an exercise, okay, prove this. Let n be greater than 1 and n is a natural number, then show that n is a product of primes. Again you can prove this by using the strong form of induction, but I want you to use minimal counterexample technique so that you kind of master that. Okay. If you're not sure, just wait till the end of the lecture and then do that. But anyway, this is the correct time for you to pause, review, and proceed. Okay. Now we want to use the minimal counterexample technique in the theory of finite groups to prove some of the well-known results in finite groups. Okay. So I would like to prove about 3 theorems, actually two theorems, a special case of one theorem and a general version, and the second theorem. And the third theorem, I will leave it as an exercise. Okay, right. So now we want to start with group theory. So hereafter our groups will be finite groups. Okay. Suppose I want to prove a theorem for a finite group. Okay. I want to prove some result. So it has some property P, let us say. Right. So this is what I want to prove. So minimal counterexample technique says, okay, let me choose such. Okay, suppose the result is false, then there is at least one finite group for which the result is false. Okay, it does not have the property P, right? Then look at number of elements in G, G does not satisfy property P. Okay, this is a non-empty subset of natural numbers, therefore it has a minimum. Therefore, let M be the minimum or least element. Therefore, there is a group G such that the number of elements in M is G. This G will be called a minimal counterexample. See there will be many G with the same order. All of them may also be here. Okay? So choose one. Okay. Now what we will do will be, we will show that if H is a proper subgroup of G, of course is also not equal to identity. Alright. Notice that then G may have the property P because its order is less than G. Or there may be a proper subgroup. Okay. This is not normal subgroup of G, which of course not equal to identity also. Then let's look at G mod K. I can form the quotient group, and modulus of quotient group will be strictly less than mod G. Therefore, this will have a property P. Using this information, I will conclude G has property P. What does that mean? Give me any G minimal counterexample, then G is not a counterexample. You understand that? G is not an element of the set. Okay? Okay. It may look little vague, but just bear with me. The first theorem will make the theorem clear. Okay? So just before we go further, pause, review, and proceed. Okay? Okay. So we want to prove our first application. It is a Cauchy's theorem for abelian groups. Okay, what does it mean? Let G be a finite abelian group and P be a prime, so that P divides mod G. Then there is an element A in G, so that R of A equal to P. This is true for any finite group, but that will be our second theorem. But we want to prove the first for abelian case because it's very simple, and let's try to understand. Okay, right. Now suppose the result is false. What does that mean? So the set of groups G is finite abelian, and okay, there is a prime divisor P, so that P divides order of G, but there does not exist any A in G, so that order of A equal to G. Okay, fix a prime if you want. Fix a prime P. Okay, and let's look at set of all groups whose orders are divisible by P. Okay, but that it has no element of order P. Right? What do you want to show? This set is empty. Okay, this set is empty. Right? So let me call it. Okay, this set is empty. Suppose it's not empty. Then let's look at the set as mod G. Call it as something as G. Okay, G is in G. Okay. Now this is a non-empty subset of natural numbers. Right? And therefore it is a least element. Okay. Call it M. M is the least element of S. Right? So let G be a minimal counterexample. What does that mean? Okay, M is there. That means there is a G which is in the script G. That means G is a finite abelian group, so that P divides order of it, but G has no element of order A. Order P. Okay. So that's a G is called a minimal counterexample. Is that clear? Okay. Now what we want to prove is we want to look at our strategy. We have to prove. So start with any A non-identity element in G. Okay. Let's look at order of A. Suppose order of A is something like K, that is, it's a divisor of P. Okay, sorry, P is a divisor of order of A. Then looks, what is order of A power K? it is P. This is well known, right? Because P is a prime. Okay, yeah. You understand that order of A is Pk. That means P divides order of A. Then let's look at A to the power K. Then its order is P. This is a very general result you must have learned in group theory, right? Then that's a contradiction. Yeah, because that means the element A power K is order P and A power K is an element of G. But G is a minimal counterexample. Therefore, what we conclude? Therefore, we conclude, okay, for every A in G, P does not divide order of A. Of course, if it's identity, that's obvious. It's 1. You understand? P does not divide 1. Is it all right? Okay. Therefore, start with a not equal to E in G. Let H equal to the cyclic subgroup generated by A. Right? I claim, notice that A is not equal to identity. Therefore, this subgroup is not equal to identity group. I claim it's also not equal to G. Why? Because suppose it's H equal to G, then what does that mean? What is order of H? Mod H is nothing other than order of A. Yeah? But mod H is mod G. Therefore, P divides mod G implies P divides order of A. But we just now conclude that given any element A in G, P does not divide its order. So this is a contradiction. Okay. What does this contradiction shows? This contradiction shows the identity group is not equal to H and G is not equal to G. That is, H is a proper subgroup. Right? We got out a proper subgroup of G. Right? Now what do I do? So let us now remember G is abelian. So far we never use the fact G is abelian. G is abelian, therefore H is actually normal subgroup of G. It's a proper normal subgroup. Therefore G mod H, the quotient group. Okay. This is, since H is not equal to this is not a identity group and it's not a trivial group and it's also not equal to, H is not equal to identity, this is also not equal to G. You understand that? That is mod G mod H is mod G. Right? Now, since G is a minimal counterexample and the order of the group G mod H is strictly less than G, we know that G mod H is not in G. It is not. You understand that? Okay. Next. Now, what is mod G? Mod G is mod G mod H into mod H. Yeah. And P divides this left side and P does not divide mod H. Therefore, we conclude P divides mod G mod H. Right? Therefore, G mod H is strictly, its order is strictly less than mod G and P divides this. Therefore, maybe this is the time I should conclude G mod H is not in counterexample. Therefore, what do I conclude? Therefore, there exists, let us say GH in G mod H such that order of GH is P. Is that clear? Very good. Now, let's look at what is the order of G and order of GH. See, order of G is in G. This is order of GH as an element of G mod H. Is there any relation? Okay. Suppose this order is M, then what do I know? G to the power M is identity. This implies GH to the power M, which is G to the power MH, is identity quotient H. Right? Therefore, order of GH is a divisor of order of G. But order of GH is P. Therefore, P is a divisor of order of G. Right? But this is again a contradiction because we said, where did we conclude? Yeah, this is the conclusion. Yeah. So this contradicts that conclusion. Okay, this is again a contradiction. So what does it mean? So whatever I assume, there is a contradiction. This G is not a counterexample. That means the set G is empty, and hence the theorem is proved. Please pause the video, review it, and then proceed, because once you have understood this trick, then the rest are easy. Okay, do not hesitate. Just because when I explained you seem to think you understand, but take a few seconds, review the proof. Okay, then life will be easier for you. So now we shall prove Cauchy's theorem for a general finite group. So this is the original version of Cauchy. So what is the thing again? G is a finite group. Okay, and P is a prime divisor. Okay, oh yeah, P is a prime, and P divides mod G. Then there exists an element G in G, so that order of G equal to P. This is what we want to prove. Okay, right. Before we start with the proof uses the last theorem as well as the so-called class equation. Okay, so last theorem and class equation both are needed. So let me quickly recall what is the class equation. The class equation says that, you remember, given any element G in G, C of G is set of all A, G, A inverse, where A varies over G. This is the conjugacy class of G. This is what you call conjugacy class of G. Then what we know is, given two elements X and Y in G, then conjugacy class of Cx, conjugacy class of Y you take, either they are disjoint or they are equal. Okay, you understand that? Okay. Now assume G is a finite group, of course. Okay, therefore the number of conjugacy classes will be finite. Notice that this is an equivalence relation. Okay, X is equivalent to Y if only Cx equal to Cy. Okay, then there's an equivalence relation, right? Therefore G, okay, let us assume T is set of all x1, x2, let's say xk, so that G is conjugacy class of x1 union conjugacy class of x2 union conjugacy class of xk. Sometime I will call it C1 union C2 union Ck. As a general principle, let me assume x1 is always identity. Okay, now what is the conjugacy class of identity? It is A, E, A inverse, A in G, that means it is E, singleton. Is that clear? And similarly, when I say conjugacy class of X has only one element, what does it mean? Notice that X always belongs to the conjugacy class because it is E, X, E inverse. Yeah? Therefore, X always in there. Therefore, this one meaning is same as saying Cx equal to singleton X. When does this happen? It happens if Ax, A inverse equal to X, because it's a singleton. That means Ax equal to Xa. This is for which A? For all A. What does that mean? That means X is in the center of G. This is the center. Is it clear? So conjugacy class of an element is a singleton. It consists of that element if and only if that element is in the center of the group. Is that clear? Okay. Next, what we have is G is a disjoint union of C of x1 union C of xr, C of xr, and this is the disjoint union, right? Therefore, mod G equal to mod C1 plus dot dot plus mod CR. Remember, Cj stands for C of xj, right? One more thing I need is the following. Okay, I hope all of you remember, given an element, group element x in G, the centralizer subgroup of X is by definition set of all G in G, so that G commutes with X. Okay, this is same as saying Gx G inverse is X. Okay, this is a subgroup. All of us know this is a subgroup of G, and the most important thing we need the observation is G is nothing other than, okay, the number of elements in the conjugacy class of X into the order of the centralizing subgroup. If you know group order, group actions, this is nothing other than the number of elements in the group is going to be the number of elements in the orbit into the stabilizer subgroup. Okay, but anyway, even if you don't know group action, this you must have learned. You follow that? Okay. Please review. I may go in a hurry, hoping that you have seen it. Otherwise, you please look at it. Now, suppose P is a prime, and if I know mod P divides mod G, then mod G is a product of these two numbers. Therefore, P must divide one of them. You understand? In particular, if P does not divide one, it has to divide necessarily the other. You understand that? So in particular, P, suppose does not divide the conjugacy class of X, then P must divide the centralized subgroup. Yeah, okay, keep that in mind. Okay, now we shall prove Cauchy's theorem. So we'll start with the proof. Okay, suppose the result is false, then as usual let G, okay, fix a prime P, prime. Okay, let us look at G a finite group, and P divides order of G, but there exists no A in G, so that order of A equal to P. What do we want to prove? We want to prove G is empty. This is what we want to prove. Okay, right. If you prove that, then the theorem is true, right? So as we did earlier, what we do? Let us look at S to be the set of all mod G, where G is in script G. Since the theorem is false, there is at least one finite group G, such that P divides order of G, but G has no element of order P, right? Therefore, this S is non-empty subset of natural numbers. That means let M be the minimum of S, the least element of S, right? And that means there exists a G in script G, so that mod G equal to M. You understand that? See, notice that mod G may be M may be the minimum. For some G, mod G may be M, but there may exist an element of order P in that G. But the moment you say M belong to here, that means there is at least one group of order M. Okay, we are not claiming all groups of order M, okay, will belong to script G. We are not claiming that. We are simply claiming there is at least one group of order M which is in script G. Please understand, these are a slight logical problem, very easy to understand. It's good to think of such things. Okay, right, you understand that this G is, of course, we call it a minimal counterexample, right? Okay, now what do I want to prove? I want to arrive at a contradiction as usual, right? Now let's look at the centralizer subgroup, center of G. Okay. Now this is a subgroup of G. Okay. If it is equal to G, then the result is obvious. That means G is abelian. Therefore, okay, by last theorem, there is an order, there is an element of order P inside G. That means G is not in script G. Therefore, we know that G cannot be not abelian. G is non-abelian. Is that okay? Right. Therefore, this cannot happen. Okay. Now, next question is, does P divide order of G? Suppose P divides order of G, then remember G is abelian. Sorry, P divides order of the center of G. P divides the order of the center. Then this is an abelian group and P divides its order. Therefore, by the last theorem, there exists an element A in the center, so that order of A equal to P. But remember, A is also in G, and order of A is nothing other than the cyclic subgroup generated by A. Okay, this is independent of whether it is in Z of G or AH. Therefore, this is equal to P. You understand that? Therefore, what is the conclusion? Therefore, we conclude P does not divide order of the center. Okay, G is not abelian, ruled out, and P cannot divide the order of the center. That's also done. Now, what we do? Now, this is where I want to make use of the result which I told you. Okay, P divides here, P does not divide this kind of thing. Okay, let us go. Okay. Now, now G equal to, okay, let us say C1 plus C mod C1 plus mod CR plus mod CR plus 1 plus mod CK, where mod Cj equal to 1 for 1 less than or equal to J less than or equal to R. These are all singleton orbits. Okay, and mod Cj is greater than 1 if J is greater than R. Okay, and these are all greater than 1, greater than 1. These are all equal to 1. Okay. Now we know when is mod Cj equal to 1, if and only if it consists of one element, that element must be a central element. Therefore, this thing is same as saying, okay, this number is same as saying that number is modulus of the center, order of the center, plus summation mod Cj, J greater than R. Is that all right? Now notice that P divides this left side, sorry, P divides the left side order of the group and P does not divide this. Right? What does that mean? Then means P cannot divide this either. If P divides this, then I have a contradiction. You follow that? So this implies P does not divide mod Cj, J greater than 1. You understand? Because this is divisible by P, this is divisible by P, their differences will be divisible by P, but the difference is this. Right? P divides A, P divides B, then P divides A minus B. Okay, that's what we are using. Okay. Now P does not divide the sum. That means there is a J greater than or so that P does not divide mod Cj. Because if it divides each and every Cj, then it divides the sum also. Right? Okay. Let us call this here Cj. Right? Fix an X. See, remember by definition Xj is C of Xj in our earlier notation. Yeah? That I'll call X as Xj. And let H equal to centralizer of G in Xj. Yeah, centralizer of this element. What do we know earlier? We know that mod G equal to mod C into mod centralizer G of X. This is what I denote with, right? Now P divides this and P divides this and P does not divide this. Therefore, what can I conclude? Therefore, I can conclude P divides the centralizer subgroup, right? Now notice that mod C is greater than 1, right? Therefore, this will be less than mod G. Yeah, right? You follow that? And P divides this, and P divides R of this group. Okay. Now, what these two things put together says centralizer of this cannot be one of the counterexamples. You understand that? Because the order is minimum. That means there is an element A in the centralizing subgroup so that R of A is P. Yeah, that is again a contradiction. Okay, so yeah, this is a contradiction. Okay, and A is of course an element of G whose order is P. Right? Therefore, G is not a, there exists no minimal counterexample. The moment you say G is a minimal counterexample, I arrive at a contradiction. That means G is empty. That means the theorem is proved. Please pause, review, and proceed. Okay. Now let's prove the third theorem, which is known as Sylow's theorem. So before that, let me do that. Suppose G is a finite group. Okay. Let P be a prime. Let us assume P divides R of G. Right. So let us write G is equal to some P power n into m. Okay. Whereas P power n actually divides R of G, where n is a natural number. Okay. Right. It may happen. Okay. P divides m also. So I am not claiming, assuming P does not divide m or P and m are co-prime. We are not assuming, right? So P may still be a divisor of m. Is that okay? Right. One thing. And second, suppose let us say assume that P power k is a maximum power, so that P power k divides m. Then maximum power of P which divides mod G will be P power n plus k into some m dash, where P and m dash are co-prime. Is that clear? Now any subgroup H of G, okay, so that mod H equal to some P power some R is called a P subgroup, right? And suppose P power n plus k, or just let us assume, don't worry about this, suppose P power n is the maximum power of P which divides G, and there is a subgroup H whose order is P power n, then H is called Sylow P subgroup. Okay, this is pronounced as Sylow. Okay, this, okay, Sylow subgroup. You follow that? That is, look at capital N so that P power n is the maximum power of P so that P power n divides mod G. That means P power n plus 1 does not divide mod G. Then suppose H is a subgroup order P power capital N, then H is called a P, Sylow P subgroup. Is that clear? Okay. With this preliminaries, let me state the theorem of Sylow. This is actually theorem 1, first theorem. Let G be a finite group and let P be a prime. Assume P power n divides mod G, where n is a natural number. Then there exists a subgroup H of G, so that modulus H equal to P power n. In particular, zero P subgroups exist. Right? If this little m is the maximum power of P which divides order of G, then for that P power n also there exists a subgroup order P power n. You understand? By very definition, that's a zero P subgroup. Is that clear? Okay, so we only have to prove this. Okay. Let us start proving. Right? Okay. Now, again, we are going to play with the center. Remember, in the strategy I already said, I have to find a subgroup H, proper subgroup, or proper quotient G mod K. That K has to be normal, right? Then only I can form the quotient. So the easiest way of generating a normal subgroup will be take the center. The only trouble is center may be trivial. Then you will get G mod identity subgroup. That is same as G. You follow that? So somehow you have to get center. Is that okay? Okay, let us go slow. Don't worry. Let's look at the center of G. This is a subgroup of G, and notice that it is normal. Now, what are the possibilities? See, you have gave me a prime P, and this prime may divide the center of G, the order of the center. Yeah. Now suppose this happens, okay, or P does not divide order of the center. You understand? These are the two possibilities. So we will see whatever possibility I assume, I arrive at a contradiction. You understand that? Yeah, but then I should have started with, okay, by now you should know, okay, assume false. Let G be a minimal counterexample. What does that mean? You are fixing a prime P and said that, okay, some power of P, namely P power n divides order of G, but there exists no subgroup of G whose order is P power n. You understand that? When I say it's false, that means there exists a group G, okay, fix a prime P. So let me just say that. That means fix a prime P, then there exists G, so that P and some positive power of P divides order of G, but there exists no subgroup H of order P power n. You understand? Therefore, the collection G of such groups is non-empty, and choose the minimal one. Okay. So let G be a minimal counterexample. Okay. I ask you to pause, discuss with your friend, and understand what does it mean to say G is a minimal counterexample. Please spend a couple of minutes before you go further. So when a G is a minimal counterexample, what does that mean? If H is n is a group, okay, whose order is less than mod G, and P divides order of G, some P power K divides order of G, then H has a subgroup order P power K. This should be for any power. You understand that? And yes, do you follow that? Make sure you understand. If I have is a group G whose order is strictly less than the order of G, and P is, then there is a positive power of K, so that P power K divides order of H. Okay, then H as a subgroup order P power K. Just to make you understand, let me say this something. Suppose order of H, okay, is let's say 8. Okay, my order of G may be 12. Okay, then highest power of 2 will be 2 square divided this. Here 2 cube divide this. You understand that? So what I am claiming is, okay, if G is a minimal counter example and H is a subgroup whose order is 8, okay, then there exists an element, yeah, a subgroup of order this. That's utter triviality, right? Yeah. You follow that? Okay. Am I making myself clear? Okay. Because H itself is G, right? Okay. Anyway, so let us do that. So let G be a minimal count example. Let us look at the center of the group G. Okay, this is a subgroup. Yeah. Now, either the possibilities are P divides the center of the order of the center, or P does not divide the order of the center. Is that clear? Okay. Now, each one of them I have to arrive at a contradiction. Suppose, let us look at this case. Assume P divides order of the center. Right. Now, this is a abelian group now. This is a abelian, and therefore P divides the prime P divides the order of this. Therefore, there exists an element A in the center such that order of A is P. This is by Cauchy's theorem. Yes. Now let H be the cyclic subgroup of this. Okay. Now H is normal in G. You understand that? If H is any subgroup of the center, H will be normal in G. That's very easy because you take any H and G, GH, G inverse, because H is in the center, G and H commute, therefore HG, G inverse, which is equal to H, right? Therefore, this is normal. Any subgroup of a center is always normal. This is a trivial exercise. We have seen it. Okay. Therefore, H is normal, right? And what is order of H? It is P, right? Now, therefore, I can form the quotient group G mod H. And what is the order? Into P, that is order of H, equal to order of G. You understand that? Now, what do I know? P power n divides order of G. Therefore, I claim P power n minus 1 divides order of G mod H. Is it clear? Now, G mod H, since P is a prime, P is greater than 1, therefore this is strictly less than mod G, and a positive power of P divides order of G mod H, and therefore G mod H is not in script G, and therefore there exists a subgroup. Let us say this is good enough, right? Okay, now notice that, okay, there exists a subgroup, therefore there exists a subgroup, call it L in G mod H, so that the order of the subgroup is u to the power n minus 1. This is that clear? Yeah. Now what do I do? I look at K to be the set of all G in G, so that, okay, G H belong to L. Notice that this is nothing other than, look at the map, okay, G to G mod H, G going to GH. So I am looking at pi inverse of L. Yes? Yeah. This I claim is a subgroup. Okay. This is a claim. Why K is a subgroup? Okay. Suppose A, B belong to K. What does that mean? Okay. A of H belong to L and B of H also belong to L. Therefore, AH into BH will belong to L because L is a subgroup. But AH into BH is ABH by the definition of the coset multiplication. You understand that? Yeah. That means AB belong to K. Right? And similarly, A belong to K will imply A inverse belong to K. Because AH belong to L, therefore AH inverse, okay, is A inverse H that belong to L. That means A inverse belong to K. Therefore, this is a subgroup. Okay. Now, what is the order of the subgroup K? Notice that we just quotiented by only H. But remember, H is of order P. Therefore, I should suspect this order is P power n. But that's very easy to prove. Why? Yeah. Let us look at K to L, the map G going to GH. Okay. Right. Notice that this is a group homomorphism. In fact, I don't need this. I claim this is first, this is onto. Is that clear? Because any element in L is of the form GH. Okay. And such a G belong to K by definition. Therefore, it's onto is clear. Now I claim it's 1, 1. Suppose XH equal to YH, where X and Y are in K. Okay, in K. What does that mean? That means X inverse Y is in H. Yeah? Right? Are you following? Okay. That means what do I want to prove? I want to prove GL. Okay. Yeah, this is 1, 1. Yeah, right, right. Okay. If X is right, the elements, then I have to say X inverse Y is in H. Therefore, you follow what I'm saying? Therefore, take any two things. Therefore, K, and remember H will be normal subgroup of this. Therefore, kernel of this map, this is pi restricted to K. Kernel of pi restricted to K is H. Right? Is that all right? Okay. Therefore, the map is 1, 1. Therefore, the is that clear? Therefore, K mod H is isomorphic to L. You can also prove it directly without, this is first portable theorem of homomorphism. Okay. You can also directly prove it without using first fundamental theorem of homomorphism. Yeah. How will I prove it? Start with two elements. I have to say they are 1, 1. All right. That means I am saying K mod H is bijective correspond to this. That's all I'm claiming. But notice that that's what I proved. Yeah. This is all I want. This means give me two elements XH and YH. Okay. So we start with X, H. Okay. Where does it go to? It goes to XH. Now my XH may also be equal to YH. You understand? What does that mean? That means X inverse Y is in H. That means XY equal to YH. It will also go to XH. Are you following? So this map is well defined. And is it 1, 1? Why it's 1, 1? If XH equal to YH, if only if X inverse Y belong to H, that means the cosets are the same. Are you following? Therefore, this map is a bijection. And how many elements are there? Into mod H equal to mod K. Therefore, this is P power n minus 1 because this is equal to L mod L. This is P power n minus 1 and P. Therefore, this is P power n. Therefore, what I have shown? Okay, pause, review, proceed. What I have shown? I have shown that if P divides the order of the center, then I can find a subgroup of order P power n. That means G is not a counterexample. So now let's look at the case P which does not divide order of the center. Right? Now we use the class equation like last time. What do you have? Mod G equal to modulus of the center. I am keeping the notation of the earlier case. This is Cj where J is greater than R. That is greater than or equal to R plus 1. Keeping the earlier notation. Yeah. Now P divides this and P does not divide this like as usual. Therefore, there exists a J such that P does not divide mod Cj. Exactly like in the Cauchy's theorem for general case. Right. Now let Cj equal to C and H equal to centralizer of the element xj in Cj. Right. Then what we have? Mod G equal to mod H into mod C. And what we know? P power n divide this. P does not even divide mod G. This implies P power n divides mod H. Is that okay? Now this H is a subgroup and P power n divides this, and since mod C, remember mod C equal to mod Cj is greater than 1 because J is greater than or equal to R plus 1. You understand? Therefore, mod H is strictly less than mod G and P power n divides mod G. Therefore, what do I know? Okay, since G is a minimal counterexample, H is not a counterexample. That means there exists a subgroup, call it K of H, so that R of K equal to P power n. Yeah. So in this case also, I have shown that this K is a subgroup of H, but K is and hence a subgroup of G with odd P power n. That means what? G is not a counterexample. So again a contradiction. You see that? So we have proved Sylow's theorem, namely if P power n P is a prime, P power n divides order of G, then I can find a subgroup of order P power n. Okay. In particular, if n is the highest power of P so that P power n divides order of G, but not P power n plus 1, then I have found out a Sylow P subgroup. Okay. Pause, review, proceed. So just to master this technique, please go through all these 3 examples and including number theory example 4. That will give some kind of an idea about minimal counterexample. Okay. Once you get that, okay, use it to prove minimal counterexample technique to prove the converse of Lagrange's theorem is true for abelian finite abelian groups. That is, if M divides order of G, then there is a subgroup H of G, so that order of H equal to M. Okay, use minimal counterexample. You will see how easy the proof is once you know that. Most often people use a lot of machinery to prove that, but you will do that. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed the lecture. Okay. Please review, discuss this. Now, my purpose of this record of this lecture is very simple. So as I said, almost for 40 years, 45 years ago, I learned this trick, especially in the case of Cauchy's theorem for finite abelian groups. Okay, but at that time I did not even know anything about Sirot's theorem or anything, and I certainly do not remember having seen a proof of Cauchy's theorem in the general case. Okay, but when I saw that in a book, I understood, tried to understand the technique by means of the two number theory example. Then I understood it's nothing other than well ordering principle. Okay, so you see in the induction you hike up, you go upwards, whereas in our proof you can see we go downwards, and we are using well ordering principle. So in some sense it's reverse direction. Okay, so in principle whatever result we use by finite the usual mathematical induction should be amenable, we should be able to prove using the minimal counterexample technique. Okay, so I had given 4 such examples in group theory, and it's not restricted to group theory. Is that, as I said, as a very general principle, if you have a proof by induction, then I should have a proof by minimal counterexample also. Maybe there are some technical difficulties in a given situation. I'm not claiming you can always do that. It's something like what you prove something with axiom of choice, then I should be able to prove by ordering principle or by Zorn's lemma. Or if I prove something by Zorn's lemma, since Zorn's lemma and axiom of choice are equivalent, I should be able to prove by axiom of choice. Okay. In principle, yes, but technically it may be difficult. Okay. So I'm not claiming we will always succeed. But I would like to bring to your attention this useful technique. And if some of you try to prove something very interesting, let's say within about BSc, MSc level mathematics, please share it with me. I'll be very happy. Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good day.